Hi, I'm Charlene Heydinger, and I'm the president of the Texas PACE Authority. And there's kind of a funny story about how all that happened. I was hired in January of 2012 by four gentlemen who had attended a PACE conference and decided that Texas needed PACE. They didn't know how to do it. They had seen the environmental community take several valiant stabs at it and not get anywhere. So all I wanted out of the effort was to go back to work after raising my kids, earn a good reputation in the Texas legislature, and to everyone's surprise, we got the law passed. Anyway, these four business people created Keeping Pace in Texas, a 501c6, an organization that is allowed by the IRS to lobby as a nonprofit. And we built an enormous business coalition. We reached out to all the environmental groups. I found senior Republican chairmen to sponsor the bill because Texas is a relatively conservative state right now. And we reached out to every business organization, every local government organization, every potential stakeholder we could find. We started with the banks. We knew that PACE was very threatening to the existing financial community in Texas, and so we wanted to assure them that their interests would be protected and that they could play in this new economy if we were successful in creating it. This was a big deal to get this done in one session in Texas because they meet for 5 months every other year. And so we met with the lenders and a whole host of folks the year before the session. But we started with the lenders. I educated myself on bank concerns, bank lingo, actually practiced on a friend of mine who's a banker. And then I reached out to the Texas Bankers Association, sat down with their lobbyist, and the first words out of my mouth were, if a property owner has signed a mortgage contract, they've committed to the bank not to further encumber the property and not to make major changes to the property. We want to honor that. And so Connecticut had just passed lender consent, written lender consent as a requirement, and I asked the bank lobbyist to help me draft that provision. He said, okay, I will take this to my board. They're meeting next week, but before I do that, I want you to give me one letter from a bank that has granted lender consent. And we ended up with 3. And before the legislation was even introduced, the Texas Bankers Association had agreed not to oppose it. But I also told them, you can't stop there. We're going to create a program for Texas, and you need to help us get it right. So we've had the good fortune of active bank participation from the very beginning. That was a really neat opportunity for us, and probably one that made this possible. But from the beginning, we knew and really addressed the conservative nature of the Texas legislature. They only have a little bit of time. They can only focus on the things that are absolutely essential to them. And so we started with the amazing economy in Texas and said to the legislators, you are investing billions in roads. You are investing billions in water conservation. We had, at the same time, the legislature was considering a 50-year, $52 billion water plan, and they were investing in power. And so if Texas was going to keep that amazing economic growth going, it had to have the resources to do that. What's the best way to get resources? To make better use of what you already have, right? So the business communities were all over trying to make sure that the Texas economy could continue to diversify. One other thing that we're all dealing with in Texas is that we consume 12% of the power consumed in the United States. If Texas were a separate country, we would be the 5th largest energy consumer in the world. Our power demand has gone up 20% a year, and there's no sense that that's going to stop anytime soon. We were already out of water with projecting growth in 2013. So the state, there's just a lot of focus on our resources for our current constituents and for the future. So when we came in with PACE and said, this is the first totally voluntary opportunity that businesses have to participate in reducing energy and water use, it hit at a time when the legislature, as conservative as it was doing all this investing in the infrastructure of the state. So it was really easy to say, here's an opportunity for the business community to do its part in updating infrastructure. They can't do it without PACE because the economics of investing that much money up front in order to save power, actually to save on a company's bottom line. You reduce your utility expenses, you increase your net operating income. If it were that simple, everybody would be doing it. But they're not, because there are very legitimate barriers to business investment in their property. And so PACE eliminates every one of those. It's still voluntary. So that was a great opportunity for Texas to say, okay, the business community loved it because they weren't going to have to do it. The environmental community loved it because now there was an opportunity for business to do it voluntarily, right? And everybody came within that circle. I'm really proud of the fact that the PACE Act in Texas had the support of the Texas Association of Business and the Sierra Club. It had Dow Chemical and Dixie Chemical and the Environmental Defense Fund supporting the same bill. And we couldn't have done it otherwise. So how does that work? Well, we had to be collaborative and we had to be good listeners. We're so grateful to the pioneers in the PACE community who've made PACE a possibility. We didn't come up with this idea, but we learned from it, we learned from them, and we worked it, and I like to tell people we Texified it. So we looked at Connecticut that had passed a statute a little bit, almost a year in front of us. They went live just when our governor was signing the bill. And in that short time, Connecticut closed half of the dollar value of commercial PACE in 2013. And we looked at that and went, wow, why is that? And it was there are many reasons for that, but the one that mattered to us was uniformity. And so when the stakeholder group, the day after the governor signed our bill in June of 2013, the stakeholder group got together and we said, well, now what do we do? If we don't do anything, we will start over at the beginning like the pioneers in front of us and have the same experiences. And we knew that wasn't right for Texas. So we thought, well, what if we start at the top of the evolutionary ladder, right? Pull best practices in, take lessons learned, and apply them to Texas. And that's what we did. And we ended up with a model program called PACE in a Box. And we're now in the process of spreading that across Texas. So the opportunity came for us to figure out how to do that on a totally voluntary basis. And I remember trying to tell people that we were going to create this model program using volunteers. And people looked at me like I had a third eye. Well, they look at me like that a lot, but this time there was a reason. So I said, wait a minute, this is Texas. We have no income tax. Nobody likes big government in Texas. People want choice. You can't tell a cowboy what to do. You have to provide options and let them figure it out for what works best for them. Our business community wants choice. They want good policy, but they want to be the decision makers. So we sat down and said, okay, let's start with a couple basic principles. One, this has to be uniform across the state. Texas is big, that's no small feat. But if everyone uses the same contracts and the same policies, then the transaction costs are going to be lower. The lenders and the property owners don't have to figure this out each time in each city. So that uniformity was really important to us. But the second thing was, because we had our lender community supporting us from the very beginning, we knew that they were going to play a huge role in the rollout of this program and the overall acceptance throughout the state. So one of the things that we knew had to change for this to work in Texas was that the government wasn't going to be the one to select the lender. In some of the early adapter programs, the pioneers were lenders who came and offered these great services. In Texas, if you tried to tell a property owner that this program was available to them, but they had to use a specific lender, that's a non-starter. But it was also a non-starter for our lender community. We looked at Texas, 254 counties. We're doing them one at a time. And every one of them has lots of chambers of commerce, and those chambers of commerce all have bankers on the board, and they had to be comfortable with this idea. So with the bankers at the table, it was pretty clear that in Texas, the property owner was going to choose the lender. The property owner, if they needed development services, would choose their developer. And that all of the power had to be in the hands of the property owner. The government would just do placing the assessment and the lien on the land, those pieces of this great economic development opportunity that belong to the local government, we peeled all, this group just peeled all of the, anything that could be done in the private sector and could be done competitively, we peeled it away from the administrator. What we ended up with was one administrator that would do this administration as a public service, that it would be done as part of the, if a county is going to go to the trouble of creating a PACE program as an economic development tool for its businesses, then the administration of that economic development tool needed to be part of that public service. That was our attitude. And that everything that could be done in the private sector could be done quicker, cheaper, and more in tune with the way people are used to doing business, that they could do business with the people they wanted to do business with. The stakeholders came up with this model program. We called it PACE in a Box. We tried to give it away to our 24 regional councils of government. These are non-taxing entities that each serve about 10 counties, an average of 10 counties. And they said, no, thank you. We panicked. We came up with a plan B, and our plan B is the Texas PACE Authority. I am the president of that organization. We have a fabulous staff, and together we've built this organization. We're different than a lot of other PACE administrators because we truly see this as a public service. Our commitment is to do this at the lowest possible cost. We believe that low cost will drive volume, and that the communities involved in terms of the economic development will be more greatly enhanced by volume of impact on economic development than on fees that, if they're too high, cannibalize the market they're trying to serve. And if the services are too great, they're competing with the private sector that they're trying to serve. So this is a very pro-free market form of PACE run by the Texas PACE Authority. We go county by county, and we offer this whole plug-and-play program. The documents are done, everything's done. And our goal is to not only have uniform programs in Texas, but to be a model for everybody else. And all of our work is pretty much open source. We would love to promote the kind of standardization across the country that will enable this to be boring for banks. Our goal is to make PACE a boring product for banks, that it's so common that nobody even takes a second look. Our governor was very strong on protecting consumers, and that's a big part of what we do. It adds a little cost, but we're being as efficient as we possibly can. We've rolled out in several counties, have a number more in the pipeline, and last week we closed our first project, and it's very meaningful for us. We have several projects in the pipeline. It wasn't the first application we received, but it was the right first project. It received lender consent. So our long-built relationship with our lending institutions is paying off. This is a $452,000 HVAC and boiler upgrade to the Congregation Beth Israel, a synagogue in Austin. They were moving their babies when the air conditioning failed last summer into the sanctuary to keep them cool. And there really wasn't an alternative way to update that facility. So it's wonderful to be able to have served that sacred space and to be able to say, from a nonprofit perspective, you can't put somebody's name on a boiler, right? It's very hard to raise funds for a nonprofit for mechanicals. So now they didn't have to divert their charitable dollars from their core mission, and we hope to serve our communities throughout Texas in that way. Finally, let me tell you, in Texas, what we're really excited about is our industrial sector. The Texas industrial sector uses 19% of all the energy consumed by industry in the country. We make the power, but it takes a lot of power to make power. So what PACE can do in Texas, we're going to put industrial PACE on the map, and I'm very excited about that. 51% of the power consumed in Texas is consumed by our industrial sector. So while this first project is a culmination of 4 years of passionate work on the part of hundreds of stakeholders, it's only the beginning. And my advice to anybody thinking about starting a program is to approach it as a servant leader. Approach it as someone who's going to make a huge difference in your community, and listen to your stakeholders. And if you are responsive to them, The sky is the limit on the difference that you can make. And that's the Texas story. So thank you for watching. When I moved to Texas, I was told you may not have been born in Texas, but you got here as soon as you could. And it's the same with PACENation. If you're not a member yet, join up as soon as you can. Join me and the Texas PACE Authority in keeping pace in Texas. And let us help you any way we can. Thanks.